Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerd Out, and I think I am trying to get a foot cramp. Hopefully that will ease up while I'm trying to do this review. So I had, just before this, done just a little bit of a brief overview of the books that I finished this July. I don't know when this video or any of the videos I'm recording right now will actually go up, but this is being recorded for July. I know, though, that I have other videos that I recorded for June that still need to be put up. I've just finished getting all the May ones up. But the one book that I want to talk about for this particular video is one that I'd started because I saw on another channel, and I can't remember which one. If I do remember, I'll try to remember to tag them or tag him in the description. But he was showing off his Superman collection in the lead up into the new Superman movie. But I just decided that, hey, I'm not necessarily a huge Superman fan. A lot of times, most of my exposure to Superman would be in the Superman Batman comics, just because I'm more of a Batman fan. I prefer the street level heroes. But I do have a couple of the Supermans. I have read some of the classic ones like Superman Red Sun. I think I've read Death of Superman once, and I do have it. But the one I wanted to talk about, because I did almost read Superman Batman this time, but I decided that I wanted to reread Superman for All Seasons because it's a Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale, and I like Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's work together. I have Daredevil Yellow, Spider-Man Blue. I thought I had Captain America White, but I don't have Captain America White. What other ones? I'm pretty sure I have Long Halloween. I've at least read Dark Victory. So a lot. I have a Gambit Wolverine one with Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb's work on it. So I have quite a bit of their work, or what I don't own, I have at least read. I know that there is, actually, I'm not sure if they did that one together or not. I know that's Jeff Loeb work, but I'm not sure if it's Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale together, so I'm not going to say that one. But what I like about this, besides the fact, I'm going to mention several things I like about it. First of all, at the beginning of the book, they have it looks like a classic photo album look that they're going for. And what is mentioned in the front here, and there's another page of that, is that besides Jeff Loeb, who dedicated this particular work, Superman for All Seasons, to his father, and this was in 1999 that this looks like this was put out. Tim Sale, the artist, mentions here that he, or at least he implies here, that he was inspired by Norman Rockwell and his love of a vision of Americana that resonates through its limitations. And that's the exact quote is for Norman Rockwell and his love of a vision of Americana that resonates through its limitations. And I love Norman Rockwell's work. I think that it does get that very, classic American feel. And that going into this work again with the realization that Tim Sale was pulling from a Norman Rockwell influence was a really great lens through which to view this work. And actually, this particular one does make me think of a Norman Rockwell, where you have the young boy with the girl, I believe it was at an ice cream counter, and it looks like they're preparing for their prom, kind of like it is here. He looks all puffed up. It's a really cute picture. If you've ever seen Norman Rockwell, you'll know the one I'm talking about. But Tim Sale's style tends to be very, on the one hand, it's very simple insofar as there's not a lot of, I'm going to just kind of show you that there's not sometimes his style can seem a bit bulky when you're looking at the people, kind of like simple lines. But then you look at Pa Kent, who you've got the wrinkles and stuff, but it's not like you've got the rippling muscles, at least. Yeah, look, you don't notice the rippling muscles in quite the same way that you might in a Jim Lee's artwork. It's a very different style, but almost kind of like a homey style. It's especially here. Like this scene right here does feel like it could be a Norman Rockwell, and the colors just kind of give that feeling. You can tell where the inspiration came from just by the scenery. And I know what does help with that is the first section of this, which is done from Pa Kent's point of view, is taking place in Smallville, which does lend itself for that Norman Rockwell type feeling. Now, another thing that I do love about this is not only are you influenced by Norman Rockwell in the artwork, but there are other small references to various parts of American culture. There's a reference here to It's a Wonderful Life. So here is, if you remember, when Jimmy Stewart's character goes to this one, to where, I guess it's where he used to work as a kid, and he had this thing that he would touch, and he would always say, "I wish I had $1 million. Hot dog." There's a reference to that right here with Clark's best friend. He'll walk into this diner, and every time he walks in, "I wish I had $1 million. Now, it's not the hot dog, but it's the same kind of thing where he rubs his hand on this thing. It's just it's a fun little Easter egg for people who like this kind of classic part of American culture. The Norman Rockwell influences, the classic movies like the It's a Wonderful Life, just these little Easter eggs that are in here. And it's interesting that offset against things like Clark, something I feel like I don't, maybe because I don't read a lot of Superman, but seeing him coming to realize his superpowers at this point, but it's also offset against this backdrop that doesn't feel like this is where the superhero powers should belong. That usually you see in the cities and stuff. You don't usually see it in a place like Smallville, because it's a quieter pace. There's not as much need normally for someone of Clark's abilities in some place like Smallville. But let's see what else that really caught. I'm going to look at some of my... Sorry, a lot of this is the artwork. This is just really nice. And I like the fact that each section... Okay, so it's divided into seasons because it says Superman for all seasons. So your first season, which is told by Pa Kent's point of view, is spring. And this is the beginning. Clark, I think it is him graduating. It's his senior year. So I think he's actually literally graduating high school. And it's looking forward into the future. You're seeing him coming into his powers and realizing, I have so much here. Am I going to stay where I'm perfectly happy here in Smallville, but maybe I need to go beyond because I have a responsibility with these abilities. I need to be able to help people. And so you have him dealing with that, but you also have this from Pa Kent's point of view. First of all, dealing with, okay, he's coming into his abilities. What does this mean? And then the ending idea of just the normal parents. We're going to miss him now that he's moving on to the big city. So that's your springtime. That's that particular season. Now, what is interesting is that when they move on to summer, and by the end of spring, you do see Clark move to Metropolis, and you get to see Lois. And oh my gosh, this is that outfit. I guess it is kind of 90s office wear. It's so bulky on her. I mean, you almost have shoulder pads there. But when you get to next season summer, it looks like Clark's been there a couple years, and now you've switched over to Lois's point of view, which is just really the most ideal point of view if you're going to be seeing Clark in the city and as how he's seen now that he's developed as a hero. And it's not nearly as homey here. You've lost a lot of the Norman Rockwell charm that you get in the beginning section with Pa Kent's point of view. It's looking a little bit, although it's bright, there's more. Okay, so when you look at the Smallville sections, I feel like while it is bright, there's still that kind of like warmth to it, that kind of you've got a lot of, while you have some bright colors in there, you've got this sort of nostalgia feel over it. I'm not sure if it's some of the blues that you're seeing in here. There's something about the way that the colorist addresses the way he colors the Smallville section that really emphasizes, besides the actual artwork, that Norman Rockwell type feel that you get in the beginning, which does then, contribute even more to that feeling of, Americana, kind of that hopefulness, that homey feel at the Smallville section. But when you move into the summer section, the colors are brighter. Things are more stark. You're not quite as warm as you were in the Smallville section. In Lois's section is just, it's almost harsh. And it's that then you move away from the narration of Pa Kent, which it's a very much of, you can hear Pa Kent's kind of, the narration does a very good job of capturing that small town old man kind of voice to it. Whereas when you get to Lois, you've got a little bit more of the way of, you've got her sarcasm, you've got her almost jaded way of looking at the world. And it matches very well with this very harsh lighting that you get in the section where you're in the summer section. There's just not as much warmth. Even when he heads back to, what is this? I don't know where that came from. I don't even know what that is. Okay. Even when he comes back to Smallville, in that section, Smallville looks different. Smallville looks, I don't know, harsh. It's still got some of its feel, but it doesn't feel quite as, you don't get the blues again until the night. It feels like it's still more harsh than it used to in the previous film. I'm not sure if because Clark's changed since we saw him in spring. And maybe it's just me, but it feels like the artwork doesn't feel quite as comforting as it was when you were in the spring section. When I remember looking at the same area, and maybe it's just my perception of it, but pulling up the same section, here's in spring, and I guess it is a similar lighting. Maybe it's just because the rest of the section is so harsh. By the time I get back to Smallville, it feels harsher because Clark has been really living in a world very different than what he's used to over, I think it's been a couple years at this point. And I also like this view of the sky against his glasses. So I was just trying to see if there's another reason why I linked I tagged this here. I think this particular, if anything, captures some of the beginning feel. I think it is this little section here, but even that's sadder, just by the way that it's, well, only because of the expression on Clark's face, but everything just, it's more, it just feels sadder than when he was in Smallville the first time around. Although, interestingly, you do have a similar lighting with Pa Kent's glasses and Clark's glasses. More in Metropolis, which again, that harsh lighting. Now, fall, that you move on to Lex Luthor's point of view. Now, I don't think that the artwork really changes that much from Lois's section to Lex's section. I think it continues to be that harshness just because that's what Metropolis is. Maybe a little bit darker to a certain extent. It seems almost... No, I think it's not much different from Lois's. I think there's just some rain in the sections here. I like that they do have a different character narrating each season. And this is another point where it's, again, I think a couple years have passed since the previous section from Lois's point of view. And then the final one is from the point of view is, hold on. So winter, excuse me. Winter, I believe, is from Lena Lang's point of view, so his childhood friend. Her point of view is actually the one that I found the least interesting, even though there are interesting things from it. Now, I do feel like you do return a bit more of the Norman Rockwell feel in her section, though. And that might be just simply because you're back in... You're back in Smallville for a while, and so see, I guess I'm not really, I guess really the biggest takeaway for this one is that I like the use of the different narrators for different sections. I like the emphasis on when you're in Smallville, you've got this Norman Rockwell type style, this old world type style that is throughout that section. But when you go to Metropolis, it's harsher, it's brighter, it's not as homey, and it feels more stark. So when you go between Metropolis and Smallville, when Clark only goes back for a little while, like when he does a very short visit, it almost feels to me like he feels, pun not intended, almost alien in Smallville when he returns only for a short period of time, because it's almost like he's taken on some of that Metropolis feel. But when in the winter he's been back home for a little while, it seems like the more Norman Rockwell feeling at the beginning, it settled back down on Smallville again, even though by the end he does return to Metropolis. But I kind of feel like I'm trying to compare Metropolis before and after. Again, it's probably just my perception, but it almost feels like Metropolis doesn't seem quite as harsh once he's had that prolonged period in Smallville again. That could just be my perception, my putting that based off of what I kind of get off of the character as well. But I do think that Tim Sale makes good use of different art styles to emphasize the different locations. I think that the colorist does a good job in kind of giving a different feel between the two areas as well, while still making this feel like a cohesive work. It's not too dramatic a change, but just enough that you definitely notice when you're stylistically, when you're in Metropolis versus in Smallville. Smallville almost feels like a time capsule, like you stopped in Jimmy Stewart's oh gosh, where was Jimmy Stewart's town? It was I keep hearing Pottersville in my head, but that's not the name of the town. That was what it was in his experience with Clarence. Darn it, I can't remember the actual name of the town. But regardless, Smallville could be that town that Jimmy Stewart lived in It's a Wonderful Life. It has that feel to it, which it kind of feels like time stands still there. But in Smallville, time kept marching on, and bad people doing bad things with technologies that Clark would not see back home. That's what I feel like the contrast of styles just really emphasizes how alien Clark is to a place like Metropolis, not because he's literally an alien, but because he comes from this small town background that is so different from what he's coming into in Metropolis, how he brings to the small town values, and he really needs to, when he needs to regain kind of his focus, he has to return back home and kind of remember why he got into this kind of Superman work to begin with. What drove him to that? Well, he had to go back home to remember who he was. So yeah, I do enjoy this. I probably kind of mangled the review on this because I have thoughts that kind of like we're all fighting with each other, and I didn't, like I usually do when I do these reviews, I don't think them through before I come on here. I just say what comes to my mind while I'm flipping through. So I'm sure if I was to sit and think about it, I could have more to say based off of the artwork and the character voice used for the storytelling. I think, as usual, Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb are really a great pairing for a superhero story. And I do think that when you put this next to his work like Daredevil Yellow or the Gambit and Wolverine, you're not going to look at those and see the Metropolis section against those other two books, the Daredevil, which is in New York, and I think actually, I think that Gambit and Wolverine are going to London. But regardless, those sections don't give the same feel as the Metropolis section here, which very much pulled from Americana. So I do appreciate that about the artwork in this being made to serve the storytelling, add another layer to it. And I've always thought that it is interesting that this is one of the few iterations in comics that I've seen where Lex actually has hair. I don't think I've ever seen any other comic that has that, even within Jeff Loeb's own work. I can't think of if I've seen any of Tim Sale's with Lex without the hair. I know for sure, though, for Jeff Loeb's, I've seen him have work with Lex there, where Lex is your traditional bald. But as far as I can tell, this is the only one where Lex has hair. And I thought, for some reason, I always thought that there was a section at the end that had a young Batman watching Superman play. He was there with Alfred, supposed to be a little bit after the death, but it must be a different book that I read, another Superman Batman. I can't remember which one it was, so I had to go and find that comic book because I thought it was a Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale, but it must have been a different one than this one. So yeah, that's the rambly review for Superman for All Seasons. I do recommend this. I found it to be a relaxing read. It was nice to have the sections because if you wanted to, you could read just one season and then take a break for a while and not really, while there is a storyline, like a basic storyline that goes throughout, it does break into sections where you can do just fine, like just reading spring, taking a break, and then coming back for summer and not needing really to refresh your memory that much, as long as you remember the basic Superman lore. But yeah, great comic, great classic Superman work. Really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed rereading it because this is a reread for me. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me for that really rambly review. Hope that you got something out of that. And I will see you again for the next video. God bless. Bye.